Hi, thank you everyone. So firstly, I just wanted to thank Bone Cancer Research Trust for allowing me to come and talk about my patient story. I'm going to give you an overview of my journey with chordoma, and when trying to decide on what I was going to talk about, it was really difficult to pin down an exact moment or an exact period of time to talk about. So it is just a very swift overview of everything, which I hope you can all take something away from. So I was diagnosed with chordoma in August 2019. And as a bit of an avid Disney fan, Just Keep Swimming became a bit of a motto for us. And I'm sure loads of you can kind of understand that motto of just taking everything each day as it comes. So I have to say I feel quite fortunate because I've heard so many stories about how people have taken a really long time to get diagnosis, especially for chordoma. And for me, it all happened fairly quickly. After 2 visits in a 6-month period to my GP, I was referred for an MRI for a suspected slipped disc in my back. And this is what they found. It says, ta-da! So I had a tumour in my L5 vertebrae. But what was it? They weren't quite sure. And I was referred to a specialist clinic. And when my GP phoned me to tell me that I had this, something had shown up on my scan, at no point was cancer mentioned to me, just that they were checking it wasn't something too sinister, and they needed to refer me to a specialist clinic. I needed to go in and pick up a letter from my GP surgery for my referral. I got home, got my letter, opened it up, and there it was, a sarcoma cancer clinic. And ever the optimist that I am, I was kind of like, well, that doesn't mean I've got cancer. They're just finding out, right? So the specialists went along, saw them, couldn't tell from the scan either for definite what it was. And like many people, I then went for a CT-guided bone biopsy. I think as Andy said earlier, you know, I quite naively thought, that'll be fine. You know, they numb the area, it'll all be okay. But it was afterwards that the surgeon said to me, I'm really sorry, I know that must have been really painful. You can't numb the spine. And it was the most painful thing I've ever had. But, you know, hopefully now I'd get some answers. Or would I? So after a discussion, the multidisciplinary teams couldn't conclusively decide whether I had chordoma or not. And it was decided the best route for me was to have another CT-guided bone biopsy. So this time, going in what I knew wasn't a fun time. So this time, I was called back for my results. First sign of, uh-oh. And I was advised that they were 90% sure that I had chordoma. And obviously, this is where, like many of you, your world turns upside down. I remember hearing the words, but I don't remember anything else about the rest of that appointment. Suddenly, you're swept up in a world of appointments and waiting and tests and waiting and a bit more waiting and some more appointments and waiting. And time seems to drag on forever. So now I had my diagnosis, I decided to find out a bit more about chordoma. So I'm going to give you some facts and figures. So I've taken these from BCRT's website, so hopefully they're correct. In 2017, the total number of cancer cases in the UK was 363,484. Primary bone cancer represents approximately 0.2% of all those cancer diagnoses in the UK. Chordoma is a rare form of primary bone cancer, and it's known to affect 1 individual per 800,000 people every year. And they account for less than 5% of all primary bone cancers. It affects more males than females, so on a 1.5 to 1 ratio. And around 60 to 65 people each year are diagnosed in the UK and Ireland. The average age of diagnosis is 58, and they're very uncommon in patients under 30 years of age. And finally, chordomas most frequently arise in the base of the spine, but also along the spine and in the sacrum. So I'm feeling pretty unlucky by this point. Not only, am I female, I'm of quite a young age, being 38 at the time, but also my chordoma is in the length of my spine in my L5 vertebrae. So I was advised that chemotherapy isn't really an option for chordoma. It doesn't have an impact, and that the best course of action for me would be surgery, followed by a new type of chemotherapy, proton beam therapy. And I was referred to Mr. Jeremy Reynolds, the spinal surgeon at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. I underwent surgery in November 2019. The first surgery, they'd planned or had hoped to do surgery all in one go, but they had advised me that it may happen in more than one surgery. The first surgery lasted 11 hours. They managed to complete phase 1 of the surgery by inserting the support structure into the back of my spine, which you can see, lays there in the back here. After a week of recovery, so that I could recover and be strong enough for the second surgery, I then had another 11-hour surgery when they completed phase 2. And phase 2 consisted of removing the actual tumour and placing a cage where my vertebrae was, with a bone graft inside, some bone seed inside to grow and fuse my spine. All of the construct that I have is carbon fibre, and I was advised from the beginning that was to ensure I had the best chance possible to get the proton beam therapy, because people have been refused in the past due to having too much metalwork. So apparently I am the first fully customised carbon fibre construct used for this type of surgery. Thank you. The days following my surgery were really difficult. I struggled a lot with pain in my feet and my legs. I lost my appetite, which my husband will tell you is not like me at all. And, but within a week, I made it into a wheelchair with a hoist, not a crane, as my husband liked to call it. But I was well enough after a short amount of time, about 4 or 5 days, to be moved from the John Radcliffe to Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre for my recovery. You quickly become caught up in the monotony of hospital life. Getting up early, into the routines, the washing, the meal times, the physio. And I have to say, I was lucky enough that we lived close enough to Nuffield Orthopaedic that both my parents and my husband came to see me every day, and I couldn't have done it without them. I also made a friend who was in the bed next to me, and we're going to be friends for life. I continued to struggle with nerve pain. Excuse me. So I continued to struggle during my recovery with nerve pain. There was quite a lot of nerve damage during my surgery. They didn't have to cut the nerves they expected, but they have upset them a lot, is the words they used. And I remained unable to move my toes or my ankles, particularly on my right side. Having a bed sheet across my feet was the most painful thing ever. But morphine and gabapentin became my friends. We are firm friends. And over time, I grew stronger. I'll never forget the feeling of the first time I walked again with the help of a standing walker, I think they called it. Bit like one of those baby walkers where you're strapped into a harness and you've got a big frame around you and you kind of walk along. I felt like a toddler. But I laughed, I cried, and have felt every emotion possible to be up and walking again. I made it home just before Christmas, and a bit like many of you have said, with no nurses, no routine, time to think, my mental health suffered. But with the quick thinking and support of my husband, I was in to see my GP within days, and they got me back on track. I began some physio and got stronger, working to walk with a walker, followed by a wheelie walker. Felt like a bit of an old lady again, but I loved having my shopping in the basket. Brilliant. And I received confirmation I'd been accepted for the proton beam therapy. So, in March 2020, off I went to the Christie for my pre-assessment. There we go. So I don't know how much people know about proton beam therapy, but for me, I had to lie on like a bean bag that they sucked all the air out of to form a shape around me. And that was to ensure every time I went for treatment, I would lie in the same position. And another way to ensure that you lie in the correct position is they tattoo 4 little dots onto you so that you can line up with markers on the beanbag, and then they can line the lasers up with all of that. I'd always wanted a tattoo. Wasn't quite the way I was expecting to get it. And for those of you who are Friends fans, I now have the whole world tattooed on me 4 times. So after this pre-assessment, I went back home and prepared to attend for treatment in April 2020. At this point, the world was struck down with COVID. Wasn't sure if I was going to get my treatment, but luckily the Christie confirmed that my treatment would go ahead as planned. So during lockdown, my parents won't thank me for this picture, my husband, for various reasons, was unable to come with me, and I took my parents up to Manchester with me for 8 weeks, where we went a little stir-crazy, and I had 8 weeks' worth of proton beam therapy with approximately an hour's treatment every day. So this is what the machine looks like, for those of you that haven't seen it. And I have to say, after spinal surgery, climbing up onto this bed in a hospital gown with your bum flapping in the air is not an easy thing to do, and all dignity went out the window. Being locked down for 8 weeks, there wasn't a great deal to do. Manchester was really quiet, but we found some really nice walks and green spaces, and spent a lot of time going out for picnics. I can't recommend the Christie in Manchester highly enough. They are amazing. They continued with my physio throughout treatment and throughout COVID. They provided me with some counselling, and they also gave me complementary therapy for the needle phobia that I had developed over time. So, back home, I've continued with my recovery. Due to nerve damage, I now live with foot drop in my right foot. I wear a orthotic, lovely sexy orthotic, which you can't see under my trousers. And a bit like, again, others, this one's named Meg. I have another one named Peg. And it stops me from tripping over my own feet, and being quite a clumsy person anyway, that's always a good thing. I'm able to walk my dogs again. So that was one of my real aims. I have 3 dogs, and this was me on my first dog walk with my oldest pup. I continue to exercise, so I enjoy going to Pilates once a week. A lot of my physio was based in Pilates, and I continue to do that and get stronger. I wanted to use my experience to help others, and I have become a cancer buddy at my workplace. They've set up a buddy system for those with cancer in the workplace, so I do that. I am a buddy for Oxford Spine Services Buddy Project. Try and click. There we go. And with bone sarcoma peer support here today, I'm also a mentor with bone sarcoma peer support. What have I learnt from my experience? So I've realised how much love and support I have around me, how thankful I am for everyone around me. I can't thank everyone enough for their support. I've learnt that even though you can be having a really rough time, you only get one life and you have to live it. Thank you.